Hello, Anthony. Thank you for joining. I almost said my podcast.
Yeah,
Don't,
is this a swear friendly stream?
I'm going to say yes because my podcast is called Shit You Don't Want to Talk About. So it's going to be very hard to transition to teach Gen Tech without swear words.
To
That's going to
teach
be
Jen
difficult.
shit.
Yes, yes. Teach me the shit that you don't want to talk about. That's what my two shows combined are. Thank you for joining. Teach Gen Tech. There we go. Got to get used to saying that. Please introduce yourself and what you're going to teach me.
Yeah, hello. My name is Anthony Campolo. I am a developer advocate at QuickNode, and I am also a member of the Redwood.js core team, which is a JavaScript framework. Won't be talking about that at all because it's a little more high level. But today I wanted to teach Jen here how to deploy a React application. And we'll be using a couple tools to do that. So we'll be using a specific build tool called Vite and a specific deployment platform called Vercel. And we can break down both of those and kind of explain what they are a bit from here. But yeah, I want to make a call out for one of my friends is already confused about this. My partner Jen is not this Jen. This is a different Jen that I met on the internet very recently, and you had reached out asking about like kind of how to get a DevRel job. And I love helping people get into the industry, and especially helping people launch streams. I helped one of my friends, Ben Myers, launch a stream about 1.5 years ago. And so, yeah, I was like super excited that you reached out, that you wanted to do this. I think this is gonna be really fun. I think this content is like so valuable to beginners and to other DevRel people who want to do stuff like this. So yeah, and it's like you already got title cards, you got graphics, you got a little logo right up there, you got all sorts of stuff. So it's very, very, very cool.
Thank you. Thank you. And the only thing I don't have figured out, just because I think it's a great call out, is the fact that my ring light hits my glasses, but people can't see me without it, and I can't see shit if I don't wear them. So they do show up in these. And I love the fact that your partner's name is Jen. Like that, she must be amazing.
She's pretty cool.
Jen.
Yeah.
Her
Yeah.
name is Jen.
She would never do a tech stream though. Definitely not. I did set her up with a hashnode blog though, because she's a writer.
I'm gonna pretend like I know what that is so far. Yeah.
It's
okay.
So that'll be next stream. I can show you how to create a hashnode blog. Hashnode is like a very, very cool blogging platform. If you go to ajcwebdev.com, which is my homepage, you'll see a blog, and that's a hashnode blog, whether you realize it or not.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, at least I know that you'll be returning. And I will say, I think a lot of people are excited to just see the growth and like for the opportunity for me to ask them questions in like 6 months where they're like, you've learned so much. You're not as much of a noob.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm someone who created a podcast before I had my first tech job. So I really saw a lot of parallels between my story and your story and what you're doing here. And for me, I was interviewing people who were like so far beyond where I was and trying to ask the questions that I thought would help contextualize things for me. And then that ended up having a knock-on effect of creating really good content for others who were like, I want to learn this stuff, but it's like, I don't know how to get into it. And when people talk about it, like they're using all these terms, they're just talking past me and I can't really like wrap my mind around it. So having a beginner like ask the experts like the quote unquote dumb questions, and there are no dumb questions here, is like so valuable. And it allows people who are also having those same questions the ability to kind of sit in on those conversations, be like, okay, that's what I wanted to ask. And like, that's the explanation I needed for it to click for me.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning that, because since I'm also brand new to Twitter, like I've had a Twitter account. I think I deleted it and then restarted this one in 2020. I think I've sent a total since like 2011-ish, like maybe 10 tweets ever. Like I didn't understand the concept of Twitter and like how to use it and how to make sense of it. And looking into the developer relations roles and then seeing Adam's post and thread, I was like, oh, this is actually starting to make sense. But even 2 weeks ago, I was asking people on like the feed on the thread how to get in touch with them instead of just DMing them. So it's like,
yeah, right.
Brand new to Twitter too. And I see what people post and the people I'm starting to follow. And I'm like, I got like half of that. Or like
Twitter can be scary. Like it can be scary because in one sense it can be like conversations that are really complicated. You don't quite understand. It can also be scary because like people will be very aggressive and like you'll meet some incredibly rude people on Twitter, and like don't ever feel bad about blocking or muting someone on Twitter because many
that's
of
a
them
good
deserve
call.
it. But
That is a good call.
if you find the people who are open to like have genuine conversations and who are looking to help you out, like Twitter is the most incredible professional network you will ever find. I think far better than LinkedIn personally, but there's some people swear by LinkedIn, that's fine. But I've met so many people on Twitter and connected with so many people on Twitter, and once you kind of put yourself out there as someone being part of the conversation and like putting out your own content, it's like people will start to see that. And then when you do reach out to someone as like a quote unquote cold message, like they'll know you even if you've never talked to them, because there's a decent amount of people doing this, but there's not like thousands of DevRel people, I would say, like in terms of like a specific niche. Like we're just looking at kind of like the kind of like JavaScript front end world, at most there's maybe 1,000, 2,000 DevRel people who are like, active, working at a company, doing it. And then if you look at things like, DevOps and, data science and like Web3, then you'll add in like thousands for each of those kind of niches. But like you'll find very quickly that there's only so many people you need to meet to kind of meet all the DevRel people, we're fairly like kind of small, tight knit group.
Sweet. I got it added to what are they called? A Twitter list. And I was so excited. I was like, I made the big times. I made it. I'm on a list.
Yeah. And a good list. I'm on a list I want to be on.
Yeah. And I was just like, I didn't even know these existed. That's cool. I'm still learning that. Yeah. And thank you so much, because I think also how you're mentioning with Twitter, like putting out content and those type of things, I started in my journey of Twitter the last 2 weeks, I started following Coding Therapist, and Africa is absolutely phenomenal in the fact she posts a lot about also like stretching and yoga, and which seems like so not relative, yet at the same time, I realized even now I'm like sitting at my desk all the time, that I think you're absolutely right, because when you're posting that stuff, you don't even realize how much of an impact that may be making on others yet.
The health aspect and staying healthy while you do this is really important and under discussed topic for sure. I just followed her. That's super cool. Yeah, it's like you got to stay active and you got to make sure you're not on screen all the time. Because like once you like get into this, you start really enjoying this kind of work. You're gonna find you can just like sit down and just like crank out like hours and hours of work, and it's like really invigorating and cool stuff. But then all of a sudden you're like, why does my neck hurt so much?
I've noticed that with editing I interned as a video editor, and for my podcast, I'm like, oh, I've been like seriously sitting here for like 4 hours. I need to get up. I need to, move around. But thank you again for volunteering yourself too. Like it was you were the last conversation that I was like, okay, I'm committing, I'm doing this. And we booked a date, and then somebody else booked a date. And I'm like, this is like real. There's what? So
now you can't stop it.
Yeah, now
people are start reaching out to you and asking to be on whether you want them to or not.
It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool. Okay, so it's React app with Vite.
Yes, because it's Vite? French. Yes.
Vite.
So the reason why it's Vite, and like this is just fun minutia, it's not really important, is that it was from the creator of a framework called Vue, which you can kind of think of as like a competitor or alternative to React. And Vue is also a French word, even though they don't use the French pronunciation because things are never simple when it comes to naming. So Vite is a French word that means fast, because it's what's called a build tool, which basically means that when you build a JavaScript project, like the JavaScript project you did on the Code Sandbox one, that was one where it was kind of like vanilla JavaScript. I don't think you were really using like a framework at all. And with something like React, it's almost like a different language from JavaScript. It's not entirely, but it's using something called JSX, which basically requires a compiler to transform it back into JavaScript. So you kind of need like a program to take your program and rewrite the program into something the browser actually understands. What's great though is you don't have to know how to do that. Like that's what the tools do that for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So usually you would use something like Webpack, and Webpack would be the thing you would use to kind of turn your JSX into JavaScript. But the problem is Webpack is super slow and kind of obnoxious, and Vite is basically like a faster, sweeter tool. So if you use kind of older React frameworks that use Webpack, you'll find that as you're doing it, you may like make a change and you'll save it, and then you look at your browser and you like wait, you'll be like 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, and then it'll change, and then you'll see it because it'll have to do that transformation. It takes time. Whereas with Vite, you'll save and then it changes, and it's like instant. And so that's why it's more like a code sandbox in that respect, where it's like as you're making changes, it's just automatically updating. And so that's what makes Vite like super duper sweet. There's a ton of other stuff about like the internals and how it relates to the evolution of JavaScript as a language. And like, that's not really into the scale. I can totally confuse you. But
okay,
that's the important thing, is that Vite is like the tool you're going to use to develop with.
Okay, let's see if I can summarize this and if I got it. So, and seeing if this all makes sense. JavaScript is front end, so it's like what the browser actually reads. Mm-hmm. React is a format of JavaScript, but it's more on the back end. And then you need something like Vite or the web one that you mentioned to compile it and move it from the React format back to JavaScript so it can be read by the browser.
That was all perfect. Just remove that word backend from there. So there's no backend involved here. This is all still stuff happening entirely on the front end.
Okay.
But so the backend stuff is like when I teach you Redwood.js, we can talk about the backend, because that's where you have like a server and a database and all that kind of stuff. None of that is going to be involved here.
Why would someone use React instead of vanilla? Like that part I'm not quite following.
Yeah, you could do a whole episode on that question itself. So I would say because it's going to give you certain conventions for doing things that you're going to do all the time in JavaScript, and it makes it a little bit easier. So when you're using JavaScript, you have things called events. So an event could be a click. You can have an event that says, when you click this button, I want something to happen. And then you will write code to make sure that the thing you want to happen when you click the button actually happens. Now, what React does is it gives you the ability to do that with less code and with less understanding of how JavaScript and the browser actually works. So that's part of it, is it allows you to do lots of frequently common tasks within JavaScript. And then it also gives you the ability to create components. And basically that just means if you want that button to be a self-contained piece of code that you can easily insert into, say, different pages or different parts of your application, you can contain it within something called a component. And then that component is literally just like a single tag with like a single word in it. And then you just got to import that wherever you want it, and then you can put it wherever you need it. So those are the main reasons why things like React exist. And this is the same thing with Vue. This is the same thing with a lot of other frameworks. They're all kind of based around this idea of components and like containing your logic and functionality within these components.
Okay.
This will make so much more sense once we actually like look
at
the project. So
I'm gonna say, I was just about to say, I think it's like when I get mixed up with classes. And also it makes me think of how Google lets you color code tabs now and put them in groups. So, but cool.
Here's also a nice thing about React. You can write it with classes or without. So you can completely ignore classes for the rest of your life if you start writing React. I bet that sounds nice.
That sounds pretty exciting, at least thus far. That's where I started on this journey of teaching myself all of this, because I got really stuck. So I know we talked about this, but we need to have, you said terminal and VS Code, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So let's start with, we're going to generate our project. Now, this is going to be using something called Yarn, which I already made sure you had installed. Yarn and NPM are both just like command line tools to help you do common JavaScripty kind of things, and they're all using Node under the hood. And we don't need to get into Node, but that's kind of like another important piece of the whole JavaScript ecosystem, and understanding where Node sits within things is something you're going to have to understand at some point, but don't worry about it now, because Node is like a huge beast onto itself.
Okay. So listeners, or everyone out there. If you want to come on the show and explain nodes at some point, you're welcome. DM me. Let's do this.
Let's make the font bigger in your terminal first off. So you can just do Command plus.
See, okay. I told you I haven't like touched this in so long. I barely knew what terminal was. So
yeah, let's talk about the terminal real quick. The terminal is something that scares new developers for good reason, because it's like a blank prompt and it's like, tell me to do something. And it's like, well, what do you want me to tell you to do? And you need to kind of know that ahead of time. But what's cool about the terminal is it allows you, once you kind of figure out the commands and the things you need to do, you can just tell your computer to do things and it will do it. And this is actually, there used to be a time before we had GUIs, graphical user interfaces, like this nice desktop we have, where the terminal was a computer. There was no other way to interact with a computer except the terminal. So the terminal is kind of the more long-standing way of how programmers used to work with computers. So I would say embrace the terminal. Like once you kind of wrap your mind around it, it's actually like really powerful to use. And you're going to find that it's like, if you try to always avoid the terminal, you're going to end up doing all these weird kind of workarounds just to avoid the terminal. But if you kind of embrace the terminal, it's going to be like very, very useful for you in the long run.
I would say that this is my time at Media Temple is definitely why I'm not as scared as terminal, because like when we had to fix customer servers and things like that, and yes, you're probably right, my tech leads probably did totally just like go search for the answer because I didn't know how to do that back then. We would have to go through terminal to their server, and that was like really hard to conceptualize and do. Yet at the same time, shout out to Ahmed. I actually texted him out of the blue after like 3 years of not working there, and I was like, dude, I'm not scared of terminal, and we're doing stuff on this thing I'm doing, and I actually somewhat know what you used to tell me now. I was really excited. So yay, terminal.
Super cool. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm just going to tell you exactly what to type here. So first, write the word yarn, and then do a space, and then write the word create, and then do a space, and then write Vite, V-I-T-E, space, and then now we're going to give our project a name. So what would you like to call our project today?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. All right, not a very descriptive name, but we'll go with that. Let's make it all lowercase too.
Okay. What does it need to be all lowercase, or does it need to be camel case?
So this is going to eventually be a Git repo. When I'm naming Git repos, I will do all lowercase and dashes in between the words.
Okay.
Yeah, so you do Tuesday, July 5th. Do 05, not a 5.
Cool. Why 4?
Huh?
Just because it's cool, or why?
Well, because what if you wanted to say sort it by the date, and if you do that, it's gonna go 110 to 22. It'll do it like that. So that's why you want the 0 in front.
Groovy.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's great. And then do space. And then you're gonna do 2 dashes. And then the word template. Great. Space. And then the word React. And so what's happening with that is we're saying we want to create a Vite project, and we're doing that with the Yarn CLI. And we want to create that project, and we want to name it Tuesday, July 05. And then because Vite doesn't need to necessarily be used with React, you could use Vite with Vue, because as I said, it's from the creator of Vue. You could use it with Svelte, which we haven't even talked about at all. We don't need to. You can do it with just straight up vanilla JavaScript, which would also be a good thing for you to do at some point. But we want to tell it specifically when we generate this project, we want it to be a React project. So that should be all we need to do. If you hit space, or if you hit, not space, return, then that should generate our project.
And really quick, you mentioned CLI, and for a very long time, I did not know what CLI was. I don't know why. I knew that it meant typing something like this, but I never knew that it was command line interface.
Yep. And a command line interface is what you do on the terminal. So like it's the command line is the terminal. Those are essentially synonymous terms with each other.
Yeah. Again, something I was just like, oh, that's so cool.
Yep. Awesome. So you should be able to find that project now in your VS Code. So actually, before we do that, real quick, I want to just try something. In your terminal, write the word code. Yep, and then do a space, and then write the name of your project that you just created. Yeah, and then see what happens when you do that. Okay, so we would need to configure that first. So this is a nice kind of thing that lets you just like immediately open your project from VS Code. But for now, you should be able to just go like find it within your VS Code.
Okay. I barely know how to use VS Code, so this will be fun.
Yep. So let's see. First, actually, just close that out entirely because you're already in a project. So yeah, just close that out. Like hit the red.
Oh.
Yep, and then go to File.
I didn't know that actually closed it. Oh, that's fancy. Look at that.
Yeah,
that's how you close them out. All right.
Yeah, so you want to go to File and then Open Workspace from File. I think. Let's see.
I can do Open.
I never do this. So I need to figure out how to do this real quick. Open Folder is what you want to do. There you go. Yeah.
Oh.
So.
Wait.
So hold on, cancel out of that, and then hit the red again. So go back to File and then Open Folder.
Got it. Thank you.
There you go. Yep. And then that would have been generated in like your Junod folder. Yep.
There we go.
And then hit Open. Don't do anything else. Yep, just that. Bam. Cool. Great. Okay, so now let's go back to your terminal. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do cd, which is change directory, and we're going to enter that project. So give it your name again.
You can't click back. You got to move back. cd?
Yep, just like that. Great. And then do just the word yarn and then execute that. And what that's going to do is that's going to install your dependencies. So anytime you're doing a JavaScript project on your computer, the JavaScript project is usually made up of a bunch of code other people wrote. So like you didn't write the code for Vite, you didn't write the code for React, but we're creating a project that's using those dependencies is the term. So we have to first download those from the internet onto your computer. So that's what's happening with this step.
Okay, and so just to make sure I'm following along, because we opened it in Visual Studio, that's the reason why we were able to change directories to it, because we were able to show that it existed by opening it.
So the Visual Studio code part is completely kind of decoupled from what we're doing right now. So your terminal always has kind of like a state that it's in. And so if you see right now on your command line, you see how it says Tuesday, July 05, and it didn't say that before. That's because you're like inside that directory. And so the code you're looking at on Visual Studio Code is just because you have that code on your computer and you opened up an arbitrary folder over there. You can open a terminal inside VS Code. I like to kind of keep them separate because I use a specific terminal that is called Warp and is like gives you a lot of really nice stuff. So I tend to keep them separate. You could have opened your project in Visual Studio Code, generated it, and done that all through the terminal in Visual Studio Code. But right now the two are kind of separate, but they're both doing things on your computer, if that makes sense.
Yes. I just wanted to get a bit more detail on it because I was like, I'm following along, but I don't know if anybody else would that hasn't been here yet.
Yeah, this is the type of stuff. It's like it's just getting into like the workflow of like how do you like open a project and work with it. Is like this is why I really do highly recommend people start with things like Code Sandbox, because you didn't need to know any of this to do Code Sandbox. You just like opened up a browser and started writing code, and it had your whole development environment set up for you. So that's great. But at a certain point, you gotta learn how to do it locally, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why, but it's just something you gotta eventually learn to do, and then you'll be glad you did. But there's
that's a big reason I'm also excited about Yare going through and doing a code review, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure I wrote it in HTML.
Yeah, your font sizes are still a little too small.
That work? Or you want a big?
Do one more on the terminal and then go back to, and then close that up a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then open up your VS Code a little bit more and then bump that font up like 3 times. Yeah, that's pretty good. Cool. And then you can also X out of that get started thing. Yeah. Sweet. And so you also see how now you have that folder called node modules. Mm-hmm. That is what was downloaded when you ran yarn. So open it.
Okay.
And then close it and never look at it again.
Cool. I like that.
It'll just scare you. Don't ever look at your node modules. It'll stress you out because there's like hundreds of packages in there. You have no idea what they're doing. If you're trying to look at the code, you're having no idea what it's doing. One day,
that's exciting.
You will have to go into your node modules and actually change something, and that will be the day you will know you're a senior developer.
Don't worry about that. I'll get there.
Don't ever look at that's good advice. Yeah, Ramon knows what I'm talking about. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Now here comes the magic. So now what we have to do is we've generated our project. We have some code. Now we need to actually run it locally on our machine. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to type yarn space dev in our terminal. Yep. And then hit that. And then it's going to tell you that this is now running on localhost 3000. And I'm assuming you probably don't know what localhost is.
Localhost means it's only updating to your computer. It's not actually pushing it out to anything because it's not connected to HTTPS or anything.
That was a great answer. That's exactly what it is.
Yes. I'm still really stuck on understanding going from browsers from, I'm guessing you want me to open this in Chrome or no?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming you don't have Brave.
I don't even know what you just said to me.
Brave is a more crypto native browser that has crypto wallets and stuff built into it.
We already talked about this. I'm not allowed to look at that stuff until I understand this.
Yeah,
so
exactly. And that's a good thing. So now here you are. So this is your React app. You have created a React app. You are now a React developer. And now just to make sure that that count does something, you got to click the count button. That's part of the ritual.
Wow. That was exciting.
I know, right?
I have had no idea how, Okay. I understood a lot of it. Yeah.
So now we're going to look at the code, actually, because we haven't looked at any of the code yet. So that'll kind of help us out here. So what you should do now is you should rearrange your windows so we can have all 3 of these on screen at the same time. Yeah, I would say you could move your React app so it's kind of just below your terminal. Because your terminal, you only need a little bit of screen real estate right now. Yeah, that's pretty good. Perfect. Yeah, and then just don't touch your terminal at all. That's just set and forget that for now. And then and then you could even probably move that up even a little bit more and just have it on top of there. Yeah, that's great. Okay, cool. So now you want to go to the SRC folder in Visual Studio and then go to app.jsx. So you notice how it's not a .js file, it's a .jsx file. So that's what I was talking about, how this is kind of JavaScript, but not exactly. This is something called JavaScript extension language. And the reason why is because right now what you're going to be looking at is you're going to be looking at a combination of JavaScript and HTML at the same time. So you have a JavaScript function, and that JavaScript function is returning a bunch of HTML.
I comprehend the words you're saying.
Yeah, right. So here's what we're going to do. So go into that file and everything under Hello Vite plus React, delete that.
Oh.
Yeah, so from there, and then go down a little bit more, and then, yep, keep going. I can't see entirely to the bottom, and then the div, and don't delete the header. Yep, and delete all of that. And then scroll up a little bit. Great, and then save. And now you saw the change on the left. And also part of your screen is being blocked right now by the header of your streaming setup.
Oh, yeah, I can turn that off. Give me a second. Hey, now we know that I need to make it smaller. are in a different spot. There you go.
Yeah, or just account for it with how you position the windows on your screen, however you want. So now what we want to do is where it says the P tag, change that to just say hello from Teach Gen Tech. Great. And then save. And then you'll see that change in your window. So that's what I mean. So that's HTML. That's a P tag. So you've written a tiny bit of HTML before,
A tiny
right?
bit, yes.
Yeah. So that should make sense. That you all see there's an image tag there, and there's a div, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is the HTML part. But then above that, you have the function app. And so that's a function. And so that's not HTML. You can't write functions in HTML. You write functions in JavaScript. So that's why I say this is a JavaScript function that literally returns HTML.
I think this is going to be something that, like, everything, again, you're saying is making sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like when I go through last week's training in more detail, because we wrote some things in JavaScript and some things in HTML. And now I'm like stuck on, I get what you're saying.
What's what? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, then
React's
that's why
not
I'm
going to make that easier for you. If anything, it's going to make it a little more complicated for a while because it's going to be mashing it up all together.
Okay.
But the
Yuri is going to have more questions later on. Yeah. Like, got it. I'm learning. I'm following for the moment.
And then we're going to delete one more thing where it says const count, set count, use state. Delete that. That was for our counter. We're not going to worry about that too much. That's going to be your React 102. We'll be learning use state. But for now, we're good to go. And then just for my sanity, delete line 6. And then line 11.
Would you delete line 15? Or because
no, because you want to have a space in between your imports and your function, and in between your functions and your export. Not because it's going to break anything, but just because that's the standard. It's going to look weird if you don't do that. Because there's always going to be 3 pieces here. You're going to have your imports, which is the stuff you need to make this component work. And then there's going to be the component itself, which is going to have a name. And then there's going to be, you need to export the component. So that's so you can bring the component into another file. So let's also delete the import use state at line 1 because we're no longer using that. And again, you don't need to worry about use state at all at this point. And then save that. And now just to kind of explain what I mean about this being exported, now go to main.jsx. So here you see on line 3, we're importing the app from the app file, and then we're having the app displayed in our react.dom create root. This is another React-ism that you don't need to worry about really understanding right now. But the point is that all of your components basically get smushed together into this one kind of like Uber component. And that component is then your entire app. So anytime you're trying to like trace back an issue, you can always be like, okay, where is this component? And like, how does it sit in what's called the component hierarchy? This is more React terms. That is going to take a little while to like sink in. But the point is that every file has a component. It exports a component. That component can be imported into other files.
If you're exporting it into other files, if you update the original one, will it update everywhere else without having to go to backtrack it?
And that's why when you were updating it in app.jsx, you were changing things and you were saving it and you were instantly seeing the change. You didn't have to go into your main.jsx and do anything else, right?
Okay. Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
And
great. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there anything outside of going into the individual files that are going to tell us the hierarchy?
There's what are called the React Dev tools, which will give you kind of more visibility into the component hierarchy. So that's the thing that you'll probably want to get into at some point if you plan on becoming like a React dev. This is the thing though, like you don't necessarily need to ever write React. Like I think it's an important thing for developers to learn because it's kind of becoming the standard in a lot of ways, and it's what a lot of front devs are expected to know. But if you want, you could like write Svelte, and Svelte doesn't have the same kind of hierarchy idea. It's kind of it's a little bit different. Like there's similar things, but it's not exactly the same. So for the most part, you're gonna like get deeper into some frameworks, and you're gonna like install tooling that's gonna give you better visibility into them, and you'll build mental models around them that are kind of unique to them. So for now, it's just like we're kind of just doing like a high level overview. And the point of this whole stream was not really necessarily to teach you React, but to show you how to get a React app online. That's really going to be the cool part here, because right now you don't have a website. You have a thing sitting on your computer running on localhost, and that doesn't help anybody. So for me, the thing that I think is really cool is that now we're at a point where you can get this onto a Git repo and then log into something like Vercel or Netlify, and you can click a button and it's going to deploy it for you. And so first, let's make sure that we can get this onto a Git repo at all. So I should have asked this before, actually. Do you have a GitHub account?
Yes.
Great. That's very important. So yeah, let's go to GitHub. And actually, before let me show you a cool trick, actually.
Okay.
Just type repo. Actually, first, go back into your terminal and hit Control-C.
That's Command-C, right?
Yeah, Control-C, not Command. Yeah.
Oh, Control-C. There we go.
Yeah. So that killed our development server. So now it's no longer running. So if you go refresh in localhost 3000, your React app will no longer be there. Yep, there you go. And that's good, because right now our app is done. You've written the entire app. We're finished with it.
It's so exciting. I feel like I can mess things up very well there. I'm excited.
So now go back into your browser and just go to repo.new. And then bam. Oh. So remember that one.
That's cool.
Yep. And give your repository name the same name as your project.
Okay.
Cool. And then we want it to be public, and keep all that exactly the way it is. Don't change anything. And then hit create repository. And what's cool is they're going to give you a set of instructions to actually get this on there. So if you see the instructions, don't do the echo, because you already have or you technically don't have a readme, but skip that instruction anyway. Go to start with git init. Yeah, and then do that. And then don't.
I got excited.
This is fine. That's not an error. That's good. So it's letting you know this is something that we should do later, is configure things so it uses main instead of master, because people don't use the term master anymore. They use the term main, but there's a step within this flow that will change it to main for you. So next, do git add. So git with the I.
Oh yeah, I don't, just like hearing it and typing it.
Right, yeah, totally.
Gotta get used to that one.
Yeah, so git add, and then do space and a period. And so what that's going to do is that's going to put all of your changes into the staging area. This is also git speak. Don't worry about that too much. And then now copy the git commit -m command from the browser. Yep. Perfect. So that committed everything. Now do the git branch, and that's going to change your branch from master to main. Cool. And then do the next one. This is going to set the remote. So this is what's going to actually connect your current project to this online GitHub repository online. And then the last one is actually going to push your project up into this repo. Yes. And you'll do, okay, so you're going to have to log in. It should hide it for you. I don't know if it necessarily will. You might want to pull it off screen just in case. I would say go off screen just in case. It should hide it for you, though.
I don't even know what yeah.
Also, get a password manager if you already have one. What I pay 1Password. That's actually like a piece of software I pay for because it is extremely nice and is going to save you hundreds of hours of your life just to pay for it. So I would recommend getting a 1Password account. It'll change your life.
Please use a personal access token.
Hold on. Oh no. That's not good. Okay, so that's weird. Okay, there's another kind of stupid hacky way. I think we might be able to do this. Let's see, actually. Let's try logging in to wow, this is funny. This freaking Git, man, every time. Yeah, try from the VS Code terminal instead.
Okay. And is it sign into sync settings, that one?
No. So do Command J. Great. And then run that last command again, the git push origin main. I think you're going to have to log into GitHub through VS Code for this to work. So let's first see what this does. It could probably give you the same thing. I'm teaching Ramon all sorts of stuff over here. Oh, yes, that's perfect. Okay. This is what's nice about the fact that all these companies are now owned by the same company. So GitHub is owned by the company that makes VS Code. So you just got to remember your password. You not know your GitHub password?
No, I just set up all these accounts and I made them all different passwords. So
yeah, this is, and you don't have so where are you saving your passwords? Or are you just trying to remember them all?
You know what? I would have prepared. I didn't even think I'd have to log in.
Yeah, no, this is totally fine. Yeah, you're gonna want a password manager, definitely, for sure. I would say if you need to, you can go reset your password right now, and that will take you a minute or two.
Oh, hey.
Oh, is that it?
I think Chrome might have saved it.
There
Sweet, but I can't really. I'll reset it after this.
Cool.
Yes. Yay!
Great. Okay, and then close that other window. Okay. Go back to close that one out too. Close that one out too. And then hit refresh.
On this one?
Yeah. There's your project.
Yay!
Excellent. Great. Next step should be very simple. Just go to vercel.com.
Right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
Cool. And then let's open this up to just be the whole thing, because this should be all you need right now. And then also bump your font up a couple times. Yep, that's perfect. Good. And then hit new project. Yep. And then, so add GitHub account. Yep.
Thank you for staying logged in. I appreciate you, GitHub.
And click out of that, and then import. And then notice there's something very cool happening here. You see how it says Vite already?
Yes.
So Vercel can literally look at your project and tell what it needs to build. So this is incredible. If you click the little drop down under framework preset, yeah.
Oh wow.
So you see Redwood.js is in there. Yeah, that's the team I'm on. So there's like all of these. I know the creators of probably about half of these frameworks. So if you're ever looking for more guests, I could personally introduce you to a lot of these people. But this is what's really, really cool about Vercel, is that you don't have to configure your project to tell Vercel how to build it and how to put it on the internet. It literally looks at your project and lets you just click a button, and it's going to put it on the internet for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so just click out of that because you're already all set up, and then hit deploy.
Now I'm just curious what these are, though.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I can explain this. So when I was talking about how you need to build it, that's the transforming it from the JSX to the JS. So it's going to run npm run build, which is running the Vite build command. And you could do that on your own computer too, and kind of see what that does. I skipped that step just for kind of time's sake.
Yeah.
But what it does is it takes your entire project and then bundles it together and then puts it in a folder called dist. So that's the output directory. And then the output directory is now where your project lives. And so when you're coding on localhost, that's the thing that I was saying takes Webpack a long time. Is it needs to take your code, needs to turn it into this other thing that's in a different folder with completely different code, and then it needs to take that code and actually run it in your browser. So there's all those steps involved that Vite is kind of doing for you. But when you're deploying it, your code isn't changing. Hopefully your code should stay the same once it's done and you want to deploy it. So it just takes that, it does the build step once, and then your project is built and it's in this dist folder. And then that is the thing that actually gets shipped to the server that runs your website.
I'll ask you about that again after I learn more.
And this is what's awesome about these platforms is you don't need to know any of this stuff. Like this is stuff that's important to know because at a certain point stuff is going to break and you're not going to know why, or you need to know how to debug it. But at this point, all of this is going to be done for you. You don't need to really understand any of that. I deployed like 24 websites to Vercel before I understood that a project was being built and put into a dist folder, because it just does it for you. All right, click the building little arrow, and then you can, too late, it's already done.
Yay!
So go to your dashboard, and then go to domains. Yep, and then click that. And then drop that baby in the chat so everyone else can see your wonderful new website you just created.
Yay!
Cool. You did it. You deployed a React app to Vercel with Vite. Cool, right?
It is. It is. I'm also thinking how I'm going to remake one of these.
Totally. And dude, this is what I like. This is what I do for my job. Like I create little example apps and then I deploy them to a deployment provider, and then I have an example app and then I can show it to people. Like this is literally like what I just showed you. Like this is my actual workflow for actual projects. That's because I'm a dev advocate. Like obviously if you're building a whole production app, you're not usually spinning up lots and lots of new projects and deploying lots and lots of projects. You're usually working on a single project that was built 10 years ago and is only deployed in one area. But for what you want to do, you want to be in DevRel, you want to be a dev advocate, you're going to do this 100 times in the next year, minimum.
I'm letting it soak in. Okay. So for homework, few questions. Yep. I will, just to keep the same theme on every single one of them, I will write my 3 or 4 favorite podcasts just on this instead. So if I want to change the logo, would I just upload another SVG file? Do I just Google it and see if I can figure my way out of it?
You could do that. You could literally just take what's written in the logo.svg and rewrite that, because then you wouldn't have to worry about importing a different thing back into your app.jsx, or you can create a new file with a new SVG, but then you're gonna have to figure out how to import that. That'll be another step. So like, yeah, there's so many different ways you could do stuff in React, and so many different avenues of how you can start actually like building this out into your own custom app. So yeah, that'll probably be for the next episode though.
Okay. Well, I have my homework set up for me. That's
yeah, and Ramon's saying there may be some CSS wiring you'll have to do. Right now it's set up where you have an index.css and app.css, so those should already be set up, but CSS and how CSS kind of comes into the picture is kind of its own separate complicated question, because everyone has opinions on how you should do CSS, and some people want to write regular CSS, some people want to use something like Tailwind, and like you have to actually bring out a CSS expert to talk about CSS, because I don't know, I don't write CSS at all, not because I think CSS is beneath me, because I think CSS is too complicated for me.
Okay, that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and okay, this might be a very, very silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Questions.
So what makes this an app compared to just a regular website like a .com?
Ooh, that's a great question. So most people would say the difference between a website and a web app is that a website is static content. So a website would be, say, a blog post that you can read, whereas a web app has a button that has a counter on it that you can click to make it change. So that's kind of so if you think about it, like when you have a blog, or if you have, imagine like a restaurant's menu. So you have a restaurant, you can have a menu, you can read the menu. That would be a website. If you could also buy the food on that site and actually order it and pay, then it would be an app. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm working on converting it in my head to something that will stick.
Yeah. So basically, is it interactive or not? Can you actually interact with it and do stuff with it? Or is it just like a thing you're reading? It's just like content. That's kind of the distinction that most people make between a website and a web app. But there's also lots of people who will like argue about the semantics of those two things and where the boundaries are between. But I think for me, that's a nice clean boundary that I think it is a pretty comprehensible. Most people will agree with.
Okay. So does that mean most web apps by, non-text are called websites, even though they're web apps?
Yeah, I mean, like Twitter is not a website. Facebook is not a website. Any social network is not a website because by definition, if you can't interact with it, it's not a social app, So the vast majority of things we do on the internet these days are apps, but the vast majority of things on the internet are websites because if you think about it, there's these like kind of small, there's these large companies with these like very small number of apps that we interact with on a regular basis. But that's actually like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the entire internet. The vast majority of the internet is like these small little mom and pop shops and people's personal websites and things like that. So most of those are just websites with just some content that people want to put out that people can read. But the things that people actually do on a day-to-day basis when they're using the internet are almost entirely web, because you go to the internet to do stuff, An
RSS feed.
An RSS feed is a way to get content. So a podcast has an RSS feed, and then every time someone puts a new podcast episode out, then it's added to the feed, and people who are subscribed to that feed get that new episode pushed to them. So you can do that with a blog, you can do it with a podcast.
So is that a web app then?
RSS is neither a website or a web app. It is probably what you would call a protocol, I would guess.
Yeah, that would make sense, like HTTPS or IMAP or...
Yeah, Wikipedia calls it a web feed.
Oh.
So I'd say you could use RSS within a website or a web app most of the time. An RSS feed is kind of something that people will put on a website so that web apps can consume it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. You get HTML from an RSS feed. So RSS feeds, or is it actually XML technically? I think it might be. I'm
like stuck in processing mode.
Yeah, no, we're starting to talk over you. Because I'm like, so don't.
No. I think it's good. I think it's good because it's giving me examples of, and this is something that I love about having Teach Gen Tech is I'm able to ask for things that go around it because I may be stuck on like what normally makes sense as the next step, but I'm still stuck on how this works with it. So I'm not understanding the next step. So.
Yeah. And you're still building mental models around all of these terms. Yes. And like the technology is just like really, really the hardest thing. And this is why for me, like listening to podcasts was really useful because I got to hear people constantly like speak in these terms and like speak with each other about it. So yeah, like the feed itself is XML, but a blog post inside would be HTML. Yeah, exactly. So the RSS feed itself is HTML that embeds, or is XML that embeds HTML in it, kind of the way that like React embeds HTML in JavaScript. So that's kind of one way you can think about it. XML is like a very old programming language that like is kind of baked into things like RSS, but you will almost certainly never write XML, or hopefully you won't have to write XML anytime soon.
Well, Ramon, you know what I'll be working on before our Teach Gen Tech next week. So that'll be exciting. And then I have Vercel the next day teach me about GitHub.
Well.
I feel like by then I'll have a more solid understanding, but I
Dude,
will.
that with Vercel and GitHub, like so much of the stuff you're gonna do is gonna be based around GitHub. Like the more you can learn about GitHub up front, the better, because
I'm
like
so excited.
it's like like as you saw, like that was the connection point between our project and the deployment provider. So like, and this what's really cool is that if you wanted to change your project, what you need to do is you need to change something and then push it up to your Git repo, and then Vercel will automatically deploy that new change for you. So that's that can be your homework, is make a change and then push that change to your Git repo and then see it update on your Vercel site.
I was going to say another thing that I think is very confusing to have answered at some point would be, so Stoplight is my main point of reference when it comes to GitHub, is we would be able to create new projects just like we did today, and it would sync to GitHub. I think the part that is most confusing though is going from VS Code to GitHub to update. Like, I don't know. I'm gonna ask it after Vercel's.
And this is why I say getting comfortable with the command line, because the command line is where you can do the commands to like do stuff with Git. You can also, there's Visual Studio Code itself has Git functionality built into it. There's also the GitHub desktop app, which you're gonna find that you're gonna be able to figure out like 3 or 4 different ways to get a GitHub project up on the internet. Everyone has their preferences on which ones they prefer. Some people stick with the terminal. Some people like having a more visual kind of desktop app way to do it. Some people like having it just in their code editor already. I use the GitHub desktop app for a little bit, and then eventually kind of just stuck with using the terminal and VS Code by itself. But you should play around with all these things, because then you can kind of form your own opinions about how you like to do stuff.
Okay.
And just remember, it's all part of the process. Like, you don't need to learn this all at once. You'll take in like a new tool at a time, and kind of we'll start to accrue, and before you know it, you're gonna have like 20 of these things, and you're gonna be a pro at all of them. It's just it's all part of the process, you know. I've been doing this now I first started learning to code in 2018, and then I did a boot camp in 2020, and I've been working professionally in tech for 1.5 years. So like, that may seem like a long time, or may seem a short amount of time. Kind of depends on your perspective, you know? So yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for your time. You definitely taught me quite a bit. And I'm still stuck on the processing side of it, because I'm like, okay, cool. I think I should have questions, but I'm like, I need to process it. It's a lot to take in.
The most important thing is like, you should have a question when something breaks. So it's like, when something breaks, it's like, well, how do I get to the next step? Because you had a goal. The goal was to create a project, to get that project onto the internet. As long as you have that goal, then along the way, you can worry about where the questions come in, because you'll be stuck at a certain point, and then you'll have a question, you know? So I would say that's the main thing, is like, start with a goal and then work through that goal. And then as you're going, questions will naturally arise.
Yes. And I will be getting this done before next week's Teach Gen Tech. Yes, I could see the rabbit holes, because
so many. Yeah, that's why there's a lot of times where I would start explaining something and I'll be like, don't worry about that, you know, because like you gotta stick to the goal you're trying to do, and you could fall down a week or a month-long rabbit hole with so many things along the way. So yeah, and this is why I really like just creating content and blogging, because then I can pick a rabbit hole and I can go down it, and then when I come out of that rabbit hole, I have a blog post to share with the world.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And thank you for answering so many questions. This
was super fun. Yeah,
homework is going to be where it's at.
Anytime, don't worry.
I'll be like hitting you up on Discord and having you back on the show and be like, wait, there's so many questions, just so many questions.
Yeah. This is super, super fun. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. And Ramon or Yeri, do you have any other questions?
Thanks for hanging in the chat, Ramon.
Yes.
We'll see you here.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, me and him have been following each other on Twitter for a while. I haven't interacted with each other a ton, though.
Yay. Ramon is so cool. We ended up having like a 2-hour conversation like
Sweet.
a week ago.
Yeah,
And he
yeah,
was the first.
I see him out in the community doing cool stuff for sure.
Yeah,
So
he
I
was the
see
first
you.
one that taught me about what peer programming was. So he was
Oh,
going to
nice.
have me teach me something, and then I talked to you and a few other people, and then I'm like, I'm just going to do my own show. It's just what's going to happen. You are. We see you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anthony. Looking forward to having you on the show again.
Yeah, for sure.